Like what you see here? Then be sure to subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8, a channel devoted to the history of college football. New videos drop twice a week. Click the card in the upper right corner or the link in the description to subscribe now. And now, on with our feature presentation.
I want to flash you back to 2010 for just a second, just to talk about my personal life and experience. As you guys know, especially if you follow my football channel, I am a huge fan of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and one of the biggest regrets in my life comes from the 2010 season. Despite never living in Jacksonville, I was fortunate enough to go to a couple of games a year, and each year, when the schedule came out, we would choose which games we would go to. And based on how the 2010 schedule played out in accordance with my 8th grade middle school schedule and whatnot, I could choose 2 of the following 4 games. I could pick between an early season game against the Philadelphia Eagles or an early season game against the Indianapolis Colts. And I could pick between a mid-season game against the Tennessee Titans or a mid-season game against the Houston Texans. The choice for me was obvious. We're going to the Eagles game, and we're going to the Titans game. The Eagles only come to town once every 8 years. Plus, I'd seen the Colts play for the last 3 years, going down there from 2007 to 2009. And each year, Peyton Manning just destroyed us and broke my heart. So I didn't need to see that again. And with the Titans game, that was a Monday Night Football game. So of course I'm going to pick that game in front of a primetime audience, with the atmosphere being the way that it was. And I get to miss an extra day of school out of it. Well, that turned out to be one of the biggest regrets in my life. By going to the Eagles game, I witnessed the Jaguars lose 28-3, which was the biggest home loss in franchise history at the time. And by going to the Titans game, I witnessed the Jaguars lose 30-3, which overtook the Eagles game for the biggest home loss in franchise history. The Jaguars went 0-2 in those games and got outscored 58-6. Not looking the slightest bit competitive. The Colts game that I didn't go to, because I picked the Eagles game, the Jaguars won it on a walk-off 59-yard field goal by Josh Scobie, in one of the most iconic plays in franchise history. And the Texans game that I didn't go to, because I picked the Titans game instead, well, it ended like this.
Steps up. Fires. Mike Sims. Walker. Knocked down. Oh, he caught it!
I bring this personal anecdote up because nothing stings more, and nothing eats you alive more, than when you have a definitive option between 2 things, and you choose the wrong one. It's one thing if it was just, you can pick 2 out of 8 games, or something like that, where there's no guarantee that you would even land on the other choices. But it's another to choose wrong and miss out on history because of it. And I bring all this up because ESPN had that same choice in 1991 when they had to choose between one of 2 games to air for Wednesday Night Baseball. They chose one game, then got some information and changed their mind as a result. And as it turns out, not only did they choose very poorly, and not only was the information inaccurate, but it turned out to be a mistake that more than 30 years later deserves to be remembered for just how bad it was. Because this is the story behind one of the worst broadcasting decisions when it comes to baseball in ESPN history. Before I talk about the decision, both in terms of what they did and what they didn't do, we need some context to understand what the original game plan was for ESPN. Because the original plan was to air a battle in the American League between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Texas Rangers, specifically so that a national TV audience could watch this man right here, Nolan Ryan. Now on the surface, picking a game like Blue Jays Rangers to air in front of a national TV audience on Wednesday Night Baseball seems kind of bizarre, seeing as the ratings are automatically lower when a Canadian team is playing. And the Rangers don't exactly have a large national fan base, especially seeing as they had never made the playoffs and were hovering around 500 at the time of this announcement. Your ratings will go down the drain, especially with other sports on the agenda that night. But it makes way more sense when you realize that Nolan Ryan was projected to be the starting pitcher for this game. Ryan is one of the greatest pitchers in the history of Major League Baseball, and he could make magic happen at any moment. He had 6 no-hitters entering this game, and held the record for most no-hitters by any pitcher ever. And even though Nolan Ryan was 44 years old, he was showing no signs of slowing down, as he was coming off of a 1990 season where he won 13 games and struck out 232 batters, leading his league in strikeouts for the 4th straight season and for the 11th time ever. While people might not necessarily care about the Rangers, they absolutely care about Nolan Ryan, and any chance they would get to watch one of the greatest pitchers of all time take the mound, they were going to do it. It's almost like how in Louisville, they get a ton of Baltimore Ravens games. I'm not sure how many actual Ravens fans exist in Louisville. They're watching for Lamar Jackson, because he is the draw. Take him off the Ravens, and you've got nothing, and have no reason to show this game. That was what it was like with Nolan Ryan. There was no reason for the country to care about seeing the Texas Rangers play and appear on their TV unless he was there, because he was the draw. He was the star. He was the reason. So that seemed like a pretty solid game plan for ESPN. Show Nolan Ryan pitching against Toronto, and give people a chance to watch one of the best pitchers of all time. However, ESPN wanted to do their due diligence. Before making a big decision like this, before sending their camera operators and whatnot down to Arlington, before sending their announcing crew there and having them prep for the game, before creating the promotional material for the game, and before potentially costing themselves a ton of money in advertising, they wanted to make sure that Ryan was pitching, which makes sense. It looked like Ryan was going to start, but they just wanted to make sure. So Warren Matthews, the director of programming for ESPN, personally called up Rangers manager Bobby Valentine, spoke about the situation that they were in, and asked him straight up whether Ryan was going to start. Now here's the crazy part about all of this. Any other scenario besides the one that happened, and Blue Jays Rangers is the game that is airing on Wednesday Night Baseball. Matthews only called up Valentine because he was good friends with him and had a pre-existing relationship with him. He wouldn't have done it if he didn't know Valentine. If Valentine didn't answer, or went straight to an answering machine, then Matthews would have stuck with Blue Jays Rangers. He was not going to dwell on this decision. However, when Matthews called, Valentine picked up the phone and said that in all likelihood, you've got the wrong game. He's probably going to pitch on Friday against the Detroit Tigers, but I wouldn't expect him to pitch this game against the Blue Jays. There were a few reasons for this. Number one, it was only going to be 4 days of rest, and while that by itself is not necessarily a huge deal, in Ryan's last outing, which came on Friday, April 26th in a loss to the Cleveland Indians, he threw 131 pitches. That's a lot of pitches for anyone, let alone a guy in his mid-40s. He would probably need an extra day to get his arm ready. Number two, the last time Ryan threw 130 pitches in a game was in 1990, when he pitched a complete game in a 3-2 loss to the California Angels. After that game, he had 5 days of rest prior to their next game against the Oakland A's, so precedent seems to suggest that Ryan would not go on 4 days rest after such a long outing last time. And number three, the Rangers didn't have a game on Monday, April 29th, so if you played Ryan on May 1st, it would mess up the rotation and mess up the order. So Valentine said that it was unlikely that Ryan would pitch this game, and that you're better off picking another game to televise. Again, all of this happened only because Matthews did his due diligence, which is funny, because I've criticized broadcasters and companies all the time for not doing their due diligence. And this time, we actually see someone do it, and it eventually blows up in their face. But because Matthews went the extra mile to find out the status of Nolan Ryan, once he got the news, he had ESPN call an audible. No longer were they going to air Blue Jays Rangers. Instead, they were going to air the battle in the American League between the Detroit Tigers and the Kansas City Royals. They'll draw higher ratings just by virtue of being two American teams, and because the Tigers had a propensity for playing some good games already, seeing as they played 2 games already that went into extra innings, and 2 games that were decided by walk-offs. Which raises the question, how was this Tigers-Royals game? Well, it was fine. It was close the whole way through, but in the end, the Tigers prevailed, taking it by a final score of 6-4 after jumping out to a 1-0 lead just 3 batters into the game, and never looking back. And oddly enough, the man who scored that first run of the game for the Tigers was Tony Phillips, who I made a video on a week ago, so you can learn more about him and his bizarre MLB career by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Look, this game kept people's attention for all 9 innings and was close, so it's not like people were turning this off after the first 2 innings because it was such a bloodbath. This was just another typical baseball game, and a ho-hum affair. A solid game, but it's not one that's living on in history forever, and it's not one that's remembered by people unless you were actually at this game and you have memories from that. You're not waking up the next day and remembering what happened this game. But hey, I'm sure ESPN won't be regretting their decision at all to not air Blue Jays Rangers, and to call a last-minute audible on that. Let's check in on that game anyways.
Nolan Ryan, last time out for Nolan Ryan in 8 1/3 innings against the Cleveland Indians. He threw over 130 pitches. There was some question as to whether he would take his turn tonight, but they decided after seeing him throw on the side between starts that he was ready, and he certainly is, and so are we.
Nolan Ryan's pitching. Okay, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. Well, that makes ESPN look really stupid now, doesn't it? But I'm sure nothing's gonna happen of note during this game. I mean, it's not like Ryan, at 44 years old, coming off of throwing 131 pitches in his last outing, with less rest than he thought he had, going up against one of the top teams in the AL East, is going to do something historic and throw a no-hitter, right?
That's it! Number 7 is in the books. The remarkable Ryan has done it again.
Oh, come on, are you actually kidding me? Yep, that's right. Not only did Lauren Matthews decide not to air Blue Jays Rangers because he got information that Nolan Ryan wasn't pitching, and not only did Ryan then wind up pitching, but then Ryan threw his 7th career no-hitter, as the Rangers blanked the Blue Jays 3-0, thanks to a remarkable 122-pitch, 16 strikeout performance by the legend himself, in what might have been the best game of his career, which is high praise, seeing as he started 773 of them. And as happy as Nolan Ryan was, and as happy as the Rangers were, yeah, that one's got a sting for ESPN. Because after, they were kicking themselves for not being able to show the full game, and for changing their mind at the last minute. As ESPN press representative Mike Soltis said on the situation, if Matthews wasn't friends with Valentine, and if Valentine hadn't been available, we would have televised the game. He then added, we were thinking of doing the Rangers game, because it looked like Ryan would be pitching. But Lauren, who is good friends with Bobby Valentine, called him up and asked about it. Valentine said it was unlikely Ryan would pitch Wednesday, but would probably pitch Friday. Well, not only did he not pitch Friday, but he pitched on Wednesday, and made MLB history while doing it. I can't possibly blame ESPN for this at all. They did their homework, and went directly to the source himself, and the source said that it wasn't going to happen in all likelihood. Again, ESPN did everything right here. They had a big decision to make, they did their homework, and everyone here did their job correctly. On the other hand, they got punished big time for doing that. If there was ever a case of how sometimes you can do everything right and still lose, this was that moment. Because in 1991, when ESPN was faced with 2 choices, they absolutely chose the wrong one. And more than 30 years later, it might be the biggest blunder in Wednesday Night Baseball history. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.